Have you ever looked at your debt total and thought, how did I get here? Have you ever thought what it would be like to not owe a single dollar to anyone? If you have, I know exactly what that feels like. I paid off $40,000 my first time that I became debt-free. And so today I wanted to share 7 tips on how I did that. Hi, I'm Kristen from Forward Life Network, where we go from stuck to unstoppable with faith-based tips and actionable steps. So let's get into our episode today. Okay, so I remember it well. It was around 2006, 2007, and I had just graduated from college with my brand new bachelor's degree from the expensive private university. I went and, of course, had to celebrate and bought a brand new car literally off the showroom floor of the dealership. But I never got the bow. You know how you get the bow for Christmas on the car? So I believe it was like around the holidays, and I bought the brand new Pontiac G6 in red off the showroom floor. I had just graduated from college, and I had brand new student loans, I had credit card debt, I had a brand new car, and I had my brand new job at a financial firm. And I was so excited because I had gotten this job, and we helped Philadelphia Phillies players, and we helped celebrities, and I was the new administrator, receptionist, sort of learning the ropes to this financial firm. And so my life was just really going great. I had all these things going for me. And then 2008 happened, and the financial market collapsed. And I remember the day being in the office, getting all kinds of calls from clients. The market was going down, their 401ks were being cut in half. I vividly still remember one of our clients calling on the phone and just being like, my 401k just got cut in half. And I mean, this was years of their savings and their investing and their investments, and it was a big deal. And so I remember, like, almost everybody in our firm got laid off. I was one of those people, and my perfect world came crashing down, which is really interesting because I think a lot of us have had that moment. We are living high on life and our stuff and everything, and then it's a job loss, an illness, something shifts in the family, a family member's death, and our whole world is hanging by a thread with debt. So I remember that happening, and I think it was maybe a year or so later, I got a new job. Things were starting to recover in 2009, 2010. We were in the Pennsylvania area at that time outside of Philly, so it wasn't even as bad as it was in like Florida and other places, but we still were hit in that area, and it was a tough time. And I remember hearing about a man named Dave Ramsey, and I remember hearing about a program called Financial Peace University. And so I think before that time, I had somehow wrapped my head around the idea that I needed to assess where my life was and what I was doing in my life. So that leads me to my step number 1. So step number 1, whenever you're making a big change, and I think this has kind of been a motto in my whole life from that point and beyond, but step number 1 is you have to face your numbers head on, or as I like to say, you have to know your numbers. And so that was a painful thing, but I've realized that a lot of people that are struggling in an area, they don't know their numbers. So you have to start with number 1, you have to know your numbers. And so you have to look at everything You have to look at the whole picture. So that's what I did. I looked at everything. I looked at my student loan. I looked at my credit cards. I looked at my new car that I had bought. I looked at, other things, cell phone bills and other bills that I had. I assessed everything. I assessed every bill, every debt, any other thing I had going on. And I put that all together in one place, whether it's a notebook or digital, but I wrapped my head around where I was starting. And I'll be honest, at that age, in that climate of what was going on economically, felt like a weight on my shoulders. It felt like something I would never get out of. That is exactly how it felt. But that is step number one, is you definitely have to, as I like to say, keep your eye on the ball. You have to look at the ball. You have to face it. It's scary, but you never fix a problem unless you face it head on. So step number one, know your numbers. Step number two in my journey of paying off $40,000 was I got help. And what I mean by that was I started listening to Dave Ramsey's podcast as much as I possibly could. I started listening all the time because there's something about hearing that encouragement and also being around people that are going in the direction that you're trying to go in something. It's good to have that community. It's good to, when you're facing things, it's good to be around people that are facing the same thing, because it's hard. I had friends of all backgrounds. There's people that had lots of money from their family. There's people that didn't. There's people in all different types of where they're at in their journey, but it's really good to get around people that are going through the same things as you are, because it's an encouragement instead of always being around, oh, the new car and the this and the that. To listen to people talking about getting out of debt and contentment, and, Dave promoting driving an old car and all this stuff, talking about being weird and all that stuff. It starts to reshape your identity around that kind of stuff. And a lot of these problems that we face in our life is we have to change. We have to start reshaping our identity before we even see that change. So number two was I got help from others. Number three is I stopped the bleeding. And what I mean by that is I closed all my credit cards. It's like you can't heal something if you don't stop the bleeding. So I basically stopped all spending at that point, because in that season, my goal was to be completely debt-free of all those items. And so you just can't, obviously the student loan was stopped because I wasn't continuing with education. But even all the way back then, I even said, and I'm never going to pay for education again. Not saying I won't progress in education, but I said I would never pay for it like with debt. I would never pay for education again with debt. So even stuff like that, just stopping the bleeding, and even with my cars, I told myself that there's going to be a day where I buy a car and it's going to be all cash. And I did a couple years ago. It took a while. That it didn't happen just after that point, but I just made that commitment to myself. And so I bought that car. So I had that car. I paid that off. I had it for 5 more years debt free. Then I had to buy another car. I had to use debt. And I remember when I was in the car place buying the car, I said to the person, I don't even think they heard me, but I said, this is going to be the last time I ever need a car loan. That's what I said. I'm not going to use debt. And then my next car, I actually was able to buy outright. I mean, like I got a loan, but then I paid it right off. So, you have to stop the bleeding. And I've had to do that several times in my life, but I closed all those credit cards and I stopped the bleeding. And because it is a funny thing where it's like, how do you move forward? How do you get out of this if you're just going to keep going with that? And like I said, I've had to do that several times, but I did that in that session. I stopped the bleeding. So that is my step number 3. Number 4 is build an emergency fund like first. And that's one thing Dave used to say all the time. He used to like drill that in on the show. Build the emergency fund first, then pay off the debt. And I'll be honest, I've had to go back to the basics of this several times. This was the first time I paid off $40,000 in my life and I became debt free. And I've never gotten into that much debt again. But there's been times where in little ways I've had to go back to the basics again. And the basic is that you have to start with an emergency fund first, because otherwise you have emergencies and yeah, you will use credit. So step number 4 was I built an emergency fund. That was baby step number 1. Step number 5 is choose a payoff strategy. There's the debt Snowball, which is classically Dave Ramsey, and then there's the debt Avalanche. I chose the Snowball because that was with the program that he was doing. And also, they kept saying that when you start seeing the Snowball work and you see the little debts that you pay off, it'll inspire you. And I'll be honest, I was like, oh, it won't. But it definitely did. It definitely did inspire me when I got that first, maybe it was like a $300 credit card paid off. Then I got the next credit card paid off. Maybe it was like $1,000. It was inspiring, and I did need those kind of boosts to keep me going. So I went with the debt Snowball because I do think those little wins just create that momentum for you. So, but it's good to choose a strategy of what you're going to do and then just follow that out. And I highly recommend Dave Ramsey's baby steps as well. Step number 6 is to increase your income. And they always say that like the hole is how big your debt is, but your shovel is your income. And that's very true. I had to really work on increasing my income throughout that process. And it was like in the midst of the recession and the recession recovery. But I always had to keep looking for opportunities to increase my income. And that happens a lot with job transition nowadays, because you just really, it's hard to get the raises when you stay in the same position, unfortunately. So just looking for those long-term career goals is really important, and increasing my income really helped. So even if it's like a side hustle or things like that, it definitely helps to have those jumps in income, and it helps the process. Otherwise, it just feels like it can take forever. Number 7 is know that it won't be forever and celebrate yourself along the way. And I think that's so important. I've seen so many creative ideas, people doing little, like they make those little paper chains and stuff where they do little color in things they can color in. But I think it's really important to celebrate your wins. And honestly, sometimes those celebrations for me were just like really random things, or, you know, or realizing that something was a want more than a need and not buying it. And honestly, like kind of celebrating that I didn't buy it. So I think those things are really important to stay motivated. And I just remember doing the debt Snowball, I paid off a lot of like smaller things in a fast period of time. I think I paid off my credit cards first, then I paid off my car, and then I finally paid off my student loan. And I remember being in that process with my student loan and just feeling like it was going to be forever. And it wasn't even like that much compared to like a lot of people, because you know, I did do education somewhat smart, and then I did 2 years of community college, but then I did my bachelor's degree at a private university. And so, I mean, I saw people walk out of there with $100,000 in debt, and, you know, I'm just glad that I didn't, but it still was part of the debt. It was still part of that $40,000. And I remember getting to the point where I just, a couple things. One, I felt like, am I ever going to get this paid off? And the other thing was, it was at a time in my life where I really wanted to step forward, and I would see people my age buying houses and like doing other things. And I felt like kind of like I looked like a loser because I wasn't doing all those things. And then I would like talk to people, and what I realized is that I might have looked like the loser because I wasn't buying a house at that time, but like my financial picture was becoming much better than any of those people. They had like $100,000 in student loans. They were buying like $300,000 houses. They were buying brand new cars. Like I didn't even like it just I started realizing that a lot of people my age, millennials, they like were just doing things in debt, like major debt. And so even though I looked like the loser, I was kind of the winner. And so that was encouraging. And honestly, I think also it kind of broke a part of me that wanted to always look smart and successful and like I'm winning. You know, it's like I had this thing where I wanted that stuff to be happening. And the crazy thing is now at this point in my life, it's like when you get everything you want, you realize like it doesn't matter that much. It doesn't really matter. Like what matters is, well, for me, what matters is to give to others. And what matters is to have, you know, freedom, the freedom to follow the Lord in my life and make different decisions. And of course, since that time, I lost my father, I lost my husband, all these tragedies kind of like hit my life. But I feel like because I had paid off a lot of that debt and I was in a better place, I was able to weather a lot of those storms. You know, I was able to weather some of the storms of life. So, and you know, I've had to revisit these steps. I've had to revisit the basics. And just going through some of that, losing a husband, I've had to revisit this stuff. But I know that I've been able to weather some of those storms because of dealing with some of this stuff. So it doesn't matter where you're at in the process. And there's always a starting place. And I think it's hilarious because I was like back in my 20s at this time. And I just thought like I was so far behind. I was like in my 20s and I had this $40,000 worth of debt and I just thought I was so far behind and I should have had my house by then. I should have had, you know, wealth by then. I should have had all this stuff. And what I realized is that you can start whenever. And I'm the age I'm at now. Now I'm in my 40s. And so whether I would have started back then or not, you know, I got to this place by starting back then, but there's always room to start over. There's always room to start again. And if you are in debt, you can get back to these basics and you can pay it off. You're going to be older anyways. You're going to be, 5 years, 10 years older. You can start again. And I've had to start again. I've had to reapply these principles. I never quite got into that much debt again, but I've had to start, on little things. And so I just want to encourage you that it can be done and it's a great thing to start and do. Thanks for tuning in today, and I hope you visit us at forwardlifenetwork.com and just comment below, what has your life been with debt? Have you overcome it? Are you still struggling? Are you ready to start? Comment below. I just want to hear all about what's going on in your world.